Good evening. Welcome to July 19, 2022 Select Board Sewer Commissioners meeting. This meeting will also be held virtually in hybrid setting. Please follow the agenda of the Zoom login information. This is a special meeting for the purpose of declaring the town admin finalists. At this time, I would like to thank the subcommittee and also the search firm for recommending the finalists. So I call the meeting to order. Roll call. All members present. Next item on the agenda, review last minute items. Is there any last minute item to discuss?
So you have the questions, you have your candidates for this evening. So I think the one thing the chair talked to me about today is that the chair will open with each of the candidate, ask the first question, and then I'll follow up with the remaining questions after that, going through the process. And I just want to remind the board members, this is your interview. Feel free to, interject with any follow-ups you want, at any point during the process. But we will set aside 1 hour for each of the candidates on the interview side with the process. So we have the 2 candidates for this evening.
Thank you. The next item is conduct the interview for the town administrator position. As John Petrin from the Community Pedigram Associate mentioned, mentioned the interview questions will be asked from the various categories. John Petrin will be asking it. These questions are previously reviewed and approved by the select board members. After response from the candidate, select board members can ask follow-up questions related to the same topic through the chairman. If no follow-up questions, we will move on to the next question. So if you are not talking, any of the audience, please mute your audio to avoid echo. So we have the first candidate at 4:45. Do we need to wait for 4:45?
Well, they're not here.
They're here. The candidate is here, so it's up to the board. I mean, you're
Those are just recommended times.
right.
So I'm ready.
Those are just recommended times. And so Raj, if I could please, John's going to sit up here with us, just so it makes it easier to ask the questions.
Yeah. The first candidate is Jennifer Warren Diamond.
Yeah, yeah.
Would like to get started then?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can someone get that?
Hey, Jennifer, we're all set. I won't put the chair a little bit forward here, so you can have a seat. But okay, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Warren Diamond to the board. Just as a note, Jennifer, we have 4 select persons present, but the chair of the board is operating from the
Excellent. Okay, well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you wish to open the interview.
Good evening. Thank you for your interest in West Boylston and congratulations on being a finalist. I would like to introduce our select board members. Myself, Rajesh Kumar, Mr. Chris Lucho, Vice Chairman, Mr. Mark Frieda, Clerk, and select board members, Mr. Patrick Crowley and Ms. Christina Fedon. Please take a few minutes to tell us about your history and your specific interest in this question, and why do you think you would be successful in this voice?
Okay, so thank you, and thank you for that introduction. Before I really get going, I just want to thank all of the work that has already gone into getting you folks here to this process this evening. It's been a very thorough vetting. So as you can see from my resume, I have a diverse background in various sectors of government. I have worked at the state level. I've worked for the Worcester Housing Authority, which is the second largest housing authority in New England. And most recently, I have worked for the town of Oxford. I have been there for a little over 3.5 years. and currently hold the position of Assistant Town Manager. I have been fortunate to have a mentor there who has really showed me the ropes and has encouraged me to jump out of the nest and get into my full-time vocation as a town administrator. And so I have been looking at the market to see what's out there. The first thing that interested me in West Boylston was the proximity. I live 8 minutes down the road, and I say that not for a shorter commute, but I'm looking for a community that I can respond quickly if I need to come back to the town in an emergency, and also to become part of the community so that folks see me around at different events and that I'm engaged in that way. So that's the first thing, you know, kind of the cursory level interest specifically in West Boylston. But as I began to really dive into the documents and things that are on your website, you have done a lot of work here. You have already established many, many policies that provide a clear roadmap for anybody taking this position. You have very strong and stable finances, and that's something that I would want to look to continue. So that's kind of the broad brush of what interests me here. I think at this juncture in my career, I truly am ready for the next step, and I am looking to work closely with a board that is engaged, and I've found that this board is extremely engaged, and we could work together collaboratively on a bunch of projects that are already in the works and bring some new ideas to the community to continue to move forward.
Thank you, Jennifer. And as we move forward, I'll be asking the questions as we discussed, and the board members can interject at any point and do follow-up questions through the interview. So how would you work with the board in understanding the vision of the board for the town, and what do you see your role in that process, as well as setting a path for implementation?
Sure. So as you are all intimately aware, the board is the primary policy setting or body in this community. And so I would want to work with the board to establish clear goals and objectives for not only the next fiscal year, but then some long-term goals, and to hear from the board where there is some consensus, where folks all kind of want to go together, and help them to see what, if the need is there, to see what the residents are feeling, what the business owners are feeling, do some surveys, do some engagement with the community to bring that back to this body to help guide your decision-making. And then once you establish your policies and your visions, then the ball comes into my court. And it's my job to make them really happen and jump off the page and into reality. And in doing so, I would check back with the board, provide frequent communication about where we are, what's working well, if there's any hiccups, and continue that dialogue so that your policies become implemented.
Leadership, management, what's the difference?
So in the role of a town administrator, you need to be both a leader and a manager. So a leader, I believe, has a strong sense of where the community is and where it needs to go, and will show others through their own example. I want to hold everybody to the same standards and accountability that I hold myself to. So by that, I mean that if communication style and work ethic and work product, that should all flow from me, and that's leadership. Management, I think, is more of a day-to-day, knowing what's going on, helping the projects through the various points that they need to go through, removing obstacles, and helping to guide and frame for employees and staff the direction of the community.
So as the administrator, what type of work culture do you hope to create and foster with the employees? And how would you go about implementing and accomplishing that?
Sure. So I think that sometimes municipal workplaces have a bad rap of being, a difficult place to work, and there's a lot of talk. But I found that that is not true if you are engaged with your employees and you are helping to mentor them and creating a place where people want to come to work. I think that all municipalities, one of our biggest challenges that we're going to be facing is human capital, our human capital. There aren't a lot of people coming into various municipal sector types of jobs. And so we want to retain who we have, and we also want to grow people and grow our bench. So find opportunities for our staff to continue to advance their own education, to be part of decision-making processes when appropriate, to find out from staff what is important to them. And I think when you engage folks, that is the type of thing that leads to a positive work culture and makes them want to stay here when the town is putting an investment back into them. And did I fully answer that question, John?
Okay.
No, did I? I think.
Not for me to determine.
Okay. I just didn't want to leave anything there. But I think,
Okay.
Our employees are the most vital component of any organization.
So you've been doing a lot of research on West Boylston. In your opinion, what are the key issues?
So I think that, as I understand, the community is currently undergoing a facilities assessment. You have put a lot of resources behind some new facilities, this building, public safety, the senior center, and you want to maintain that investment. So that is going to be a big project for whoever takes on this role, is to make that facilities assessment come to life, and that we are taking a good look at everything so that we maintain the investment. So what do I mean by that? Look at all the systems. Make sure regular maintenance is happening to HVAC systems and boilers. See if we can get some economy of scale going with doing multiple projects at the same time. So that is a big project, but you've already done a lot of work there. I think that you also have you've had a facilities assessment done on the school side already, and there's going to be some significant investments that are going to be required in those school buildings, as was revealed by that assessment. So that is going to be a big challenge. I think also just continuing economic growth and development in the community. You don't have a lot of land, but there are some vacancies, and sometimes it can be difficult for a municipality to really attract folks, but if there are any barriers that we could remove to people who are looking to locate here, that would be important. So what do I mean by that? If there needs to be zoning changes, make sure that the website clearly outlines what are the processes that a business will have to undergo in order to come here, all of those types of things, identifying opportunities for continued economic growth. And then I think lastly, like all municipalities, we have an uncertain financial future here. We don't know if we're really going to go into a full recession or not, but there's some indications there. And so to try to hold services level if there is a downturn is going to be a challenge for all municipalities, quite frankly, across the whole country.
So finances is one of the key area, for a town administrator. Why don't you tell us about your past role in financial planning, including developing the budget, capital improvement plan, and ensuring financial sustainability?
Sure. So in Oxford, we have a very collaborative approach to our financial planning. So what I've been involved in is the town manager and the finance director and myself all sit together. We work with department heads to understand what their needs are, and then balance those needs against the other departments and go back and if they're not going to balance out, ask what is important now today, what can wait, and really understand that part of the process. So that we are making sure that the basic services are met. Then from there, the finance director goes and makes her Excel spreadsheets, and then I get involved again in helping to develop the budget message to the community, help to make sure that there's clear explanations available to the community, we do a formal budget presentation to the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen, so preparing all of those documents that are going to be essentially on a PowerPoint to show not only the board members, but the community at large, how did we arrive at these figures, what were our assumptions, and what are our priorities. And then finally to town meeting, getting those numbers understood by the resident taxpayer in a way that's easy to understand. That's going to be different in every community. So every community has a different kind of structure internally of how that all happens. I understand here that it's the town administrator's budget that's presented at town meeting, but with recommendations of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. So I would want to make sure that the boards knew early on in the fall what are the assumptions that we're going into this coming budget with, and the department heads understand that as well when they are presenting their budgets. And then as the budgets start to come in, to be sharing them. This is our preliminary budget, and continue to finesse those documents all the way to town meeting, because things change. Things change all the time. We don't always know what we're getting in state aid until kind of the final minute. So continue to finesse those, take a look at how our taxes are coming in, if it's as predicted or if something's off. And you also have ARPA money too, so that's going to be a different way of looking at our capital planning, which was the second part of this question. So capital planning, we ask everybody to put everything on the table and analyze it all together, because what is a critical need for one department perhaps doesn't become as critical when you're weighing it against the needs of the whole town. And so that's my role, is to help balance that and to understand what we can afford. But we do have ARPA now to help offset some of that if there are some capital projects, to use those one-time revenues towards that. You have a very clear capital planning policy, and you have a capital planning committee, which is huge. And so you want to make sure that those folks are understanding what the needs are going forward, and really looking at the when and if maintenance is appropriate as opposed to a new dump truck.
So you just made a lot of points in that answer, a lot of what I would be looking for. So how would you immerse yourself in the finances and the budget process here in West Boylston?
So you also have a very clear timeline, which is great. I actually printed it out. So it's going to start pretty soon for whoever takes this role, and sitting down with the assessor to develop those to find out what the new growth figures are going to be. So I would sit down with the whole financial administrative team. What I mean by that is the assessor, the accountant, the treasurer, collector, and get a picture of where we are. Are things as predicted 6 months ago? Does this look as expected? And then start to work with capital projects also in the fall, and the capital committee, to come up with the plan for what's going to be our capital program. What you have a fall town meeting. Are we going to do any of that right now in this fall town meeting? Are we going to put it off? We'll get our free cash figures. What makes sense? Do we want to do it now? Do we want to wait till May? and just really working with those teams. I know that I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I know that the assessor is critically important in helping me understand what I need to understand in terms of new growth. I understand the treasurer collector is critically important for me to understand how our taxes bills are coming in, and that the accountant is critically important, so to make sure that we're reconciled and that all of our expenditures are kind of following where we expected them to be. And so it's really a collaboration between that whole finance team so that I can make my recommendations to this body.
Financial forecasting. I'm just going to toss that out. What would you do for that?
Well, DLS has been so kind to give us a nice cheat sheet tool, financial forecasting module on DLS, which I would absolutely, I haven't played with it fully, but I would absolutely be working with that. But I think for financial forecasting in general, I would look at trends at a similar time in 2007, 2008, I would want to be seeing what happened in this municipality back then to understand if we really are going into a recession, what is that going to look like for West Boylston? I would want to be looking at what projects what does the building department have coming in for new permits? Are there any big projects for financial forecasting that we didn't necessarily have on our radar? And then looking at what are our kind of standard revenues and what are our more elastic revenues, and come up with a full picture for what the financial forecast realistically might be, and then budget down from there and have a conservative number that we go forward with to base our entire budget off of.
So describe a situation where you were creative in developing a financial alternative.
Creative in developing a financial alternative. Well, I would say that right now it's moving things from what we had planned, and this isn't the most novel idea ever, but what we had planned in our capital program with free cash, seeing what we can spend ARPA money on instead, so we don't have to use that free cash, so that we can take that free cash and put more money away in stabilization. That's not novel. People are talking about that. But, that kind of looking at what are other revenue streams. I like to, looking at capital also, look for projects that there's grant funding for. So if we can, say we have a $100,000 bridge, but we can get $50,000 from the state. So we put $100,000 of funding in at town meeting, and now we're offsetting that by $50,000 because I spent some time writing a grant. Well, now we have $50,000 more that could be reallocated elsewhere. And so that's the kind of thing that you want to be looking for, other one-time, so it's often one-time revenues, John, looking for other one-time revenues that we can help to offset.
So are you talking about grants? What are some examples of grants you've been involved with?
Well, I think it was cruel, but the very first grant that the town manager ever had me do was the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund grant. And if folks aren't familiar with that grant, you need to have a town meeting vote. You need to hire an architect, a preservation architect, before even submitting the grant. And then the grant that went into Boston was about that big. So this was a comprehensive grant that I needed to have a deed restriction voted on at town meeting to say that if the state gives us this money, we're never changing these historic elements, ever. And also that you need to, with town meeting vote, appropriate the full amount of the project plus a contingency in the case that the grant was not awarded. And that was successful. So you see that there was multiple things that had to happen before we could even apply. And we obtained $55,000 for that grant, and I am so glad we did. And it was supposed to just be some restructuring of an exterior wall and some historic windows. And when they took that exterior wall down, the amount of damage that was brewing underneath that wall was incredible. We ended up having to get additional funds for it, but that would have been a huge problem in this beautiful historic structure if it wasn't tackled. I've also been involved in writing community compact grants. Community compact grants are a wonderful grant option given by this governor. Hopefully the next governor is going to continue the program, but they have different focuses each year. So they have an IT grant, then they have, we did actually this, which I was going to get to, a GFOA budget document. That's the Government Finance Officers Association Comprehensive Budget Document. We did this with a grant. And now this is the town of Oxford's budget. It's not a spreadsheet. It is a huge comprehensive document that helps people really understand what are the various factors that go in to make our budget. And then I've also been involved with trails grants. I've been involved in writing grants to do we have some properties that are blighted and potentially have some hazardous materials in the soil, so to get some assessment work done before the town maybe does a tax title taking on them. We want to see what's in the dirt first. So grant writing is absolutely one of my strong suits. I don't think that it's as hard as folks think it is. The state tends to come out with all grants on a cycle. So what I like to do is anticipate what's coming and do we have a project that matches this? I don't believe in just applying for a grant because there's money there. It needs to be a project and a need that you have. So I think that's an important cautionary point about grants, is that you don't want to bite off more than you can chew and get into a project that really wasn't needed. But grants are an excellent one-time revenue source.
John, one question there. Have you had any experience with not state grants? Outside of the state,
Yes, so we have a grant program called the Janet Malzer Humanities Trust, which is a local grant program that we use to do some upgrades to our town common bandstand area, which those are different because it's a different set of eyes that are looking at those grants. So you need to be aware of your audience. We also we work in an area that's called the Last Green Valley. It's a corridor that runs from Massachusetts down to Connecticut, but they have some grant programs that I've been involved with. Typically, those grants tend to be smaller, but a few benches and some bike racks, or a few benches and some bike racks. Every year I do the Maya grant. That's a pretty easy risk reduction grant, and that's another non-state grant.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So hypothetical here, not that this ever happens at a town meeting, but let's say a local resident stands up at a town meeting and proceeds at length to lecture to citizens of the town on the various town functions that he or she feels are wasteful and extravagant. Through sheer force of personality, this citizen riles up the meeting, and they are bound and determined to slash funding to the programs you believe are vital. How do you deal with that situation?
Well, first, I would hope that the moderator would be making sure that this resident was staying within the scope of the question. And that would be the first and foremost point, is that, and if the moderator, wasn't to give town council a little nudge to go talk to the moderator. But let's assume in this hypothetical that that this is fully within the scope of the question. And so I think that, that person's going to get some traction, and there's going to be some other people that are upset, and then it could snowball very quickly into a situation that nobody wants at town meeting. So I think it would be important to get up and remain calm and explain to not so much that resident, but everybody else at town meeting the answers to what they're complaining about. So is it 4 DPW guys leaning on a shovel somewhere? Well, no. Explain how the DPW works and what projects they're working on, or I thought this was really wasteful. Well, this is why we thought as a community that was important. And a lot of folks think that we operate just like a corporation. And I heard a really interesting analogy yesterday that most people are looking at things beyond the box. Let's think outside the box. And that's from the corporate world, and that's a corporate thought. But in municipal world, we are constrained by the box. And there's a lot of things that folks think we can do that we can't do. And like prevailing wage, all of our projects have to involve prevailing wage and procurement law. And so, yes, something might have been cheaper, but to explain why things cost that. And hopefully that if it doesn't really generate too much traction, give a quick, calm response. If there's a specific department's budget if they're not slashing the whole budget, get that department head to come up and speak to town meeting voters. I think it's often better when it's coming directly from the department head. They know their department's best. And then hopefully move on and not have it be, a full derailment of town meeting.
Let's move on from finance to personnel.
I do have one question. So in your current town, are you involved in transportation improvement projects? I do know that, in your current town, there are many projects are in line. How successful you are in transportation improvement projects?
Oh, transportation improvement projects. So we have a pretty robust DPW director who's fabulous. But where I have been involved in transportation projects is our roads are really bad in Oxford, quite frankly. I'm not speaking out of turn. Our roads are really bad. And the $500,000 we get from Chapter 90 money, coupled with the $500,000 that we put into the operating budget for that, is simply not enough to do anything but maintain what's called the PCI. And so we had to go out for a borrowing and to infuse some money, some significant money to bring all the roads up. So I was involved in strategizing how we were going to present this borrowing, working with bond counsel, and then strategizing how we would get this to pass. And so it was a $20 million debt exclusion. And the debt exclusion passed at town meeting, and unfortunately did not pass at the ballot box. And I have learned some very important lessons from this. And it's been eye-opening. But to answer your question plainly, the DPW director does handle the majority of the transportation improvement projects.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving to personnel. So in HR today, what are some of the key issues that you think need to be addressed?
Well, as I stated before, I think retention is our most important issue. And giving staff the tools to grow within an organization is incredibly important. I think also that we are going to come to a point where we're going to have a little bit of a generational change of who is coming into the workforce and what their expectations are in coming into a workforce. And we are not corporate America, work from home, and have pizza every Friday. And so that is going to be a challenge for municipalities to see how we can attract, recruit, and retain that next generation into our organizations. I think that burnout is becoming a problem for HR. I think that unfortunately we've seen with COVID and moving into a virtual world, in a lot of ways there's been a loss of decorum, and that can really burn people out when they are being pummeled constantly by the community. Other HR issues, we have some liabilities. Your pension is well-funded, but you do have, I think your OPEB is about 3.5% funded, so that is an HR issue for retirees that we want to make sure that that continues to get funded. And general costs are just going up. So the costs of an employee, every time a community undertakes a compensation study and a salary survey, by the time that is completed, it's almost already out of date. And everybody's comparing what their neighbors have and trying to beat their neighbors. And so the human capital cost is going to become more expensive, and that's going to be a difficult burden on municipalities. The taxpayer wants to make sure that they are getting a good bang for their buck and they're not overpaying folks. But if you look on the MMA's website, you'll see there's certain positions that are open all across this Commonwealth. And these aren't things that you go to college for. These, you don't go to college typically to become a town clerk or an assessor. So that is going to be a very critical HR difficulty, is getting folks in the door and keeping folks in the door. You always have the routine kind of HR functions of employee improvement plans and making sure folks are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and IODs and that kind of thing. But that's normal. That's normal HR stuff. This is really what's facing municipalities today.
When you're hiring, what are the 3 most important qualities you're seeking in a person?
Sure. So I think that I want somebody that's coachable, because like I said, there isn't a lot of folks coming into this world, so you might not get exactly the full package when you post a position, and so somebody that can learn. I want somebody that is going to be a team player. We all run on light staffs, and not to have folks that are completely staying in their silos. If the town clerk's office needs help getting out dog licensure mailings, that somebody will be willing to stop what they're doing and help stuff envelopes, that kind of thing. So a team player is important. And then I want somebody that has good research skills. I think that there's a lot of information that is free and available, and I want somebody that knows how to access it and to use those resources.
Great. So how do you encourage teamwork in a workplace?
I think that you really do need to break down the silos, and you need to get people physically working together. So I think department head meetings are great. Department head meetings are critical. But you also need to have more staff-wide meetings to make sure that everybody gets in a room, give folks a chance to talk to one another, get to know their colleagues. If there is room to have a little bit of fun, and have that pizza party or celebrate people's birthdays, that's really important, because it's those relationships, when you're just kind of talking over an ice cream, that translate into, I'm willing to pick up the phone and help this person out with their problem. I know they're struggling with this. And to put folks together, if you know that I might have the answer to your question, but I know that Joe has the answer to your question. You don't work closely with Joe just because of where you work in the organization, but to put you with Joe, and so that you and Joe start talking and you start developing that relationship, and really help coach that, and to get people all kind of, when you get people working together as a team and you all start walking in the general same direction, some really great things can happen.
So on the other side of it, how do you deal with somebody who's maybe not a team player?
Sure. So this is the part of the job that nobody envies. And I think that, having a legal background, I understand the critical importance of documentation. And you want to start documenting early in the process if there's something going on. And the hope at every step in progressive discipline is that that person will come into the fold. So start with coaching the employee, getting them to understand how maybe the way they said something made somebody else feel, and hopefully it will resolve itself. But if it doesn't, to continue providing opportunities for the behavior to rectify, and if it doesn't, and it's of significance, so not just not being a team player, you might always have that curmudgeon in the building that's going to do their own thing, and everybody kind of knows that. But if it's really something else, then you need to be prepared to take the next steps, because that one problem employee that's really stepping out of line can make the entire organization become toxic. And so progressive discipline is there for a reason, and you have a pretty strong policy outline of how that would go in this community.
Have you had a time in your career or an employee or someone you work with that you had to deal with, faced with a moral decision that you had to make in your professional life? And how did you resolve that?
The moral decision was my moral decision?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, yes, absolutely. I have had an employee, or employees rather, that have come to me to talk about a situation, and they have said, but I really don't want the town manager to know. Well, I'm sorry, but for the organization, I need to let the town manager know. And I've explained to the employee why it was that I needed to bring this forward.
So let me rephrase. I'm sorry, maybe. So a situation where you were faced, or one of your employees were faced with a situation where moving forward, you didn't feel was morally right.
Oh, okay.
So let me clarify something about that. So I want to deal with it from that side of it.
Okay, so yes, and it wasn't in the municipal sector. So I worked at a law firm, and we had a client agreement. We had an exclusive client agreement, and this is all publicly available information, so I'm not speaking out of school here. And the owner of the firm wanted us to take on a second client, which was really his private corporate client. It was him. It was his corporate entity. And to start representing his corporate entity. And that violated our agreement with our exclusive client. And here I am, a young lawyer who has been given the incredible opportunity to go litigate all across the Commonwealth, which was an amazing experience. And I said, I feel as though my license may be in jeopardy. And I left the job. And that was a difficult decision to make, but it was ultimately the right thing to do. And that law firm is no longer in existence. So.
Okay. In small towns, it's not always possible to solve a situation by hiring staff. So, for example, how would you go about assessing the needs of IT, the use of software, and so on, and develop a work plan to accommodate a situation of that nature?
Sure. So this is actually something that we did in Oxford with IT specifically. We had an internal IT staff of 2, and we were at the point where the risks coming from the outside world were more than this internal staff of 2 could handle. And so we ultimately ended up making the decision to, one of the people were set to retire, but we made the decision to close the department down entirely and completely outsource our IT. So I can help you troubleshoot a printer. I can help you troubleshoot, what's happening on your Word document. But I can't tell you what the vulnerabilities of the server are. And so hiring this outside company, they did a soup to nuts assessment of where our vulnerabilities in our system were. We had to keep it very quiet at the time, obviously, to avoid risk. But they completely overhauled the entire IT system, and it was relatively budget neutral because the costs that we saved on those 2 employees plus their health insurance covered the contracted services costs. And that company that we have contracted with has done all of the major upgrades and now is there for weekly maintenance, actually every Tuesday. I saw him earlier today, and continuing to work on the system. But we, something like IT, where that is really specialized, it's important that you have the best set of eyes that you can afford on looking at the problem. I think, maybe it was 2019, you saw some cases where towns had been completely hijacked and it was ransomware essentially, and they were completely locked out. And so that was the risk that we were at. And I'm happy to say that that's no longer the case. So contracted services for that specialized type of thing is very important and can be budget neutral.
Okay, let's deal with a minor detail now, communications. Talk to us, how would you increase communications internally, externally, and use of technology, and what communication methods would you bring to the position for the town?
Sure. So this is something that I work on all the time in Oxford. This is one of my key duties. I'm the website admin, I'm the social media admin, and I do the community newsletter. So I recognize that a lot of our residents believe that we're living in a digital-first society, and so that we need to have our website and our social media updated, pushing out information all the time. And when I say social media, that's not like for, some people get nervous when I talk about social media. That's not for a two-way street dialogue where we're going to fight about an issue. It's the town pushing out information about events, road closures, community forums, that kind of thing, so that people can go and easily see what's going on. But not everybody is digital first, and so this community benefits from having a great local newspaper that does coverage, and so you would want to be putting out information, media advisories, news releases in the item as well, to get it out to the kind of the segment of society that's not looking online. Your website already has integration built in it for e-subscribers. Some folks don't know it's there, and so I often are reminding, I just had somebody say, well, why didn't I know about that election? I didn't know the date of the election. Well, you need to, here's how you sign up for e-alerts from the website, and a lot of folks don't know about that, so pushing that information out to those folks. We need to be multifaceted in how we approach communications. And then internal communications are everything from day-to-day desk touches, where you are just going around seeing what everybody's working on, what do they need help with, what's coming into their offices, to communicating with the staff through memorandums, emails, meetings with department heads, meetings with townwide staff, like I said, and really making sure that everybody is well informed.
From a town perspective, what does customer service mean to you?
Yes, I think that customer service is really what we do in everything we do. So customer service is not only how we answer the phone and how we send an email, but it's also the services we provide in making sure your roads are plowed, that you know when the library is going to be open, and it really, the way you treat your residents, it really is critically important because they're funding all of what we do here. And so we want to keep our residents happy and informed. And I think that a lot of times we're really good at it, quite frankly. I think that a lot of folks that come into town service are doing this because they have a passion for public service. And we want to be, nobody came into municipal sector work because they wanted to get rich. It's because we want to give back. And we want to help people. And so that's, I think, where a lot of your staff's mindset already is. And so, yeah, it's not just about those communications. It's also about the services we provide is customer services, making sure that the trash is picked up on time, that sort of thing.
So just then talk about your interactions with the public and just give us a couple of examples.
Sure. So I'm the assistant town manager, but there's no administrative assistant, there's no principal clerk. I am the face of the town manager's office. So I am sitting right there at the front desk, and folks come in each and every day. And sometimes they come in to say, attaboy and great job, but that's often not the case. So typically when people are coming in to the town manager's office, it's because there's been an issue, perhaps in another department, or perhaps with a decision that the town has made that folks aren't exactly happy with. And so I try to diffuse those situations, provide people with the rationale or reason or understanding of why something happened, so that they can understand that this didn't just occur in a vacuum. We had public forums about this, that kind of thing. So I'm interacting with the public all the time. I like to pop over to the senior center when they have a lunch going on, and that's a different type of interaction that we have over there, and just check on the folks and are you enjoying your lunch today? Have you signed up for this program? I really like to be hands-on in that way, but all day, every day, my job is being interrupted by the phone or people walking in the door. So I'm not hands-off in an office somewhere.
The position comes with the fact you have to deal with conflicts and disputes and polarized issues, and maybe even more so today. How do you work through that, and what techniques do you have to try to move forward in this area?
So first and foremost, I remind myself that it's not my ideas. I am doing what this body has empowered me to do. So go out, and we have come up with this that would like you to implement. So that's important to remember, is that this isn't me operating in a vacuum, right? So, but conflicts do happen, and I think that you have to try to remain calm, cool, and collected to explain things, but then you also need to know when the conversation needs to end. And there are times when the conversation needs to end, and just to say, respectfully, we can talk about this later, but this conversation isn't going to continue to occur in this way. That's rare. I find that most people aren't like that. If there's conflicts between a public body, that's for the public body to work out amongst themselves, in my opinion. That's not the role of the town administrator to play referee with a public body. If there are conflicts between bodies, then to try to figure out why, some towns have the finance committee is absolutely diametrically opposed to the Board of Selectmen, as an example. And to try to figure out why that's occurring, is it that information isn't passing well? folks being left out of the loop, and to try to help facilitate that information flow and remove any obstacles that you can there. But be mindful of who the stakeholders are and what their role is.
As you heard when we had the screening round interview, schools, are important here in West Boylston. And so how would you develop and manage the relationship with schools?
Yeah, I've had a great relationship with the school system in Oxford. We have on our third superintendent now, but all of them we have worked hand in hand with. I think that there's no reason that school and town needs to be fighting, although some communities they are. And meeting with the school superintendent, understanding what the needs of the school department are, explaining to, and they're often financial, explaining to the school committee what our financial outlook looks like so that they understand when they come in with their requests what the big picture is. I sit currently on a school subcommittee. So the school has appointed me to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for the school system. And that has been an incredible experience. So working with 2 principals, superintendent, and a member of the school committee, as well as teachers, to kind of just break down that barrier between the school and the town and find some areas for this committee, specifically in diversity, equity, and inclusion, where we can work together on some projects. I think that you really need to be meeting relatively frequently with the school side, just to understand what the needs are, especially in capital, but then the school committee is the school committee, and respect that as well. They are charged with the care, custody, and control of the schools, and so you need to balance to not overstep there either.
So you're going to be working with 5 members, of the select board, appointed by them. So, describe the overall relationship that you envision working with this group.
Sure. So I'm just going to say at the outset, open meeting law is always in the back of my head when I'm talking about meeting with a board. So I can't have a conversation with each member and then kind of do that daisy chain open meeting law violation. But the working with the chair is going to be critically important. The chair sets the agenda. The chair needs to understand what is coming in at any given time and what needs to be placed on an agenda. What's the timeliness of that? Beyond that, though, I think all members of the board need access to the same information at the same time when that time doesn't violate open meeting law. So it is my role that if you have an issue, say you're going to be talking, talking about a dump truck, right? So that all of you have the same access to information so that you can deliberate as a body and make a well-informed decision. I understand that as the policy body, you're also driving my work. You're driving my day-to-day as a board, but my expectation would be that would come through the body, not an individual. Calling up about an issue that somebody's having and can you talk to the DPW director, that's one thing, then that's not what I'm talking about. But, the big policy directives, I would expect that the board as a whole would be working with me on.
So what does a successful relationship with the board look like? What's it feel like?
I think that board members would feel confident going into Walmart, let's say, and having a resident stop them and not feel nervous that they don't know about an issue. that the board knows about things that are percolating, whether that's an email communication, FYI, this happened, somebody may talk to you about that, and it's not really necessary to come before the board, but just these are the things that are going on. I feel that the board would walk into any meeting feeling prepared to deliberate and to decide an issue, because I have done my homework to make sure that you have the best information in front of you. Working with the board, I would expect that you would ask me to research things on your behalf, and that you would be satisfied with the level of detail that you received back. And that you just, really feel supported to make the decisions that you need to make.
What happens if you feel that your opinion is different from the board?
Well, that's going to happen, and I am not the elected member of a body, and that's crystal. The residents didn't vote for me to be sitting here before you this evening. The residents voted for you all to have this very important job. And I am going to have differences of opinions, and I will explain what those differences are and my rationale behind them. But ultimately, it's your vote, and it's your decision. And at the end of the day, if I don't disagree with it, if I do disagree with it, I'm going to treat that exactly like if I was lockstep with you on an issue. So I can give you an example, that I have worked with a number of chairs. I'm working with my third chair, and we often have conversations, and talking to the chair and saying, well, I really think we should go this other way, this isn't timely, and then the chair ultimately does what they're going to do and places an item on the agenda. And it kind of goes sideways, and my role is to walk out of that room and support what the board just voted on. Not to say, I told them so, and they shouldn't have done that. You are giving me the directive, and I need to treat that very seriously. And my judgment is not better than the 5 of your judgment. So, I'm very respectful about your role as elected members.
So let's say you're in the middle of a meeting and the board makes a motion to go into executive session, but you feel that the reason for that executive session does not fall within the confines of the open meeting law, which allows for it. What do you do?
I would probably ask the chair if we could take a brief recess. And I don't want to necessarily have that conversation maybe on live television in front of the whole world to see, and take a brief recess and go talk to the chair and state what my concerns are with going into executive session, maybe inappropriately. And if necessary, depending on the situation, if they felt it was appropriate to ask legal counsel for their opinion, get legal counsel on the phone, and try to handle it offline like that. Ultimately, the board will do what the board will do. And if they weren't to take that advice and we had a recess and talked about it and they were going to go forward, well, I guess we'll see what happens, whether there's an open meeting law complaint or not.
What if the board says no to you on having a sidebar? What do you do at that point? You're in open meeting.
I would probably just raise the concern so that all of the other board members would hear that there is potentially an issue, and leave it at that, and let the board decide whether or not to go forward.
Professionally, what's your next 5 years look like? What are you looking for?
So I am looking for a community where I can be for a good chunk of time and make a difference. I think that no matter who you select, the first year is going to be a lot of learning West Boylston, no matter where they came from, and learning who are the stakeholders here, who are the players here. Really, by year 3, you really get going, and you are into the projects. You are well vested in the community. You understand, every snake hiding under every rock, what all the issues are, and I really am looking forward to year 4, 5, and 6 somewhere, because that's where I really know the community and I can really make some positive impact. I think that. You only asked me about 5, but I'm going to go further than that. I think that once a town administrator has been somewhere for maybe 3-year contracts, sometimes it's time to get some fresh blood and to get some new ideas. And I think that that's just a reality that, you're going to want to maybe go in a different direction, and 10 years, maybe I'll be close to retirement, maybe not, but, I think that that's the days of town administrators staying for 30 years, those days are over.
What did the first 90 days on the job look like if you were appointed?
Well, probably before day 1, but I'd want to talk to Mr. Purcell about what projects are currently ongoing, what do I need to know about straight away. I'd want to have some offline conversations before starting to meet some of the staff. And then you have a fall town meeting coming up, so that is going to take a lot of work to get that ready if it's not already started. I don't know if you've opened your warrant yet or not, but you will be soon if you haven't. Get that town meeting warrant ready to go. Get everything lined up. I don't know if you're going to have capital on there. I'd want to be sitting a lot with other boards, committees, and commissions to see what is before them. What kind of projects they're working on, so that I can get a very quick understanding of what's going on in the community. And of course, staff. Staff is the primary facet of understanding what needs to be done here, and talking to as many staff members as I can to understand what their experiences have been here, what they're working on, what I can do to help. So the first 90 days is going to be very busy, and I will be very thankful that I am 8 minutes down the road, because I'm going to be spending a lot of time here, quite frankly.
So we're at the 1-hour mark at this point, believe it or not. So I just want to make sure, see if there's any questions from board members, that you wish to pursue at this point in time.
I'm all set.
Okay, all set. So with that, I'm going to ask Jennifer to give, her closing remarks to the board, and we'll end the interview with your closing remarks.
Sure. So I want to thank the board for their diligence in this process and for your attentiveness this evening. I really am looking forward to diving into this next part of my career, and I would be really excited to do so in West Boylston. Like I said in my beginning remarks, as I've researched your community more and more, there's really a lot that you have going for you here. And I would like to be part of the team and understand what your vision is, both as individuals and as a collective body, and help to carry that vision forward and really get immersed in the community. So I'm excited, I'm ready, and I hope that I have your support this evening.
Thank you, Jennifer, and again, congratulations on being one of the finalists here, and thank you for your time this evening, and you'll be hearing from me very shortly as to the process. The board will be having discussion once the final interview is completed, and they'll be having a discussion this evening. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next finalist candidate, Kate O'Brien. Good evening. Thank you for your interest in West Boylston. and congratulations on being a finalist. I would like to introduce our select board members, myself, Rajesh Kumar, Mr. Chris Rocho, Vice Chair, Mr. Mark Frieden, Clerk, and select board members, Mr. Patrick Crowley and Ms. Christina Pedon. Please take a few minutes to tell us about your history and your specific interest in this position, and why do you think you would be successful in West Boylston?
Great, no, thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for the time tonight. It's definitely an honor to be a finalist for the town of West Boylston, and I appreciate your time. I have always been driven to public service from a young age. Wasn't really sure what that looked like. Even in college, was interested in government. I ended up at the MMA, the Mass Municipal Association, as associate editor there, and that's where I really I got the municipal bug, and it kind of all made sense to me where, oh, this is where I can have the greatest impact in government. So from there, I got my MPA and my MA in political science.
Just so you're relaxed. He sees what you see right here on this camera. You don't. Okay. He sees us. He sees what the TV sees.
I've never been on this side.
Yeah. That's fine. Just so you don't have to worry about it.
Thank you. Where was I? My grad school. So from there at the MMA, where I really found out, this is the path I want to go forward. So I got my graduate degrees, and from there I've worked in a few towns. I've always had the goal of being in management. I've had great opportunities in HR, communications, community relations, economic development, and that has really led me to my current role in Dover, where I'm the assistant town administrator and HR director. When I saw this opportunity become available, I definitely jumped at the chance. West Boylston is a very respected community, has that New England charm. I'm used to small town communities. I like small town atmospheres. I like to, all hands on deck kind of attitude with staff. I really like solving problems. So when I saw this position open up, I had to take a chance and to meet you all and be here.
Great. So thank you, Kate. And from this point on, I'll ask the questions, and board members can interject with questions, follow-up questions as they see fit, going on for the rest of the interview. So how would you work with the board in understanding the vision of the board for the town, and what do you see your role in that process, as well as setting a path for its implementation?
Sure. So I see my role as really just orchestrating, the board's goals. Obviously you're the policy part, and I'm sort of the liaison trying to get things done to complete your goals. So how I would do it, and I'm not sure how it's done in the past, but if I had this role, would like to meet with you and in public meetings, set out a yearly goal. With that, we'd have mid-year check-ins, quarterly check-ins, and then finally at the end of the year, while I hold myself accountable in front of you, we can go over all the goals that were fully completed. I see my relationship with you as definitely, there has to be trust and there has to be communication. No surprises on both ends. My goal would be just have a very respectful, trusting relationship with each one of you.
Leadership, management, what's the difference?
Leadership I see more visionary, and management is really the day-to-day, I wouldn't say micromanagement, day-to-day managing people, managing operations. It's really, leadership is more broad, vague. I think honestly that's sort of the hardest one, but I really feel that I can get 50-50 when it comes to both of that, because I think you do need both. You can manage people through new programs, implementations, but if they're not seeing the vision, the end goal, if residents aren't seeing why we're doing this, it's going to be a hard road. So I think being a leader is getting everyone on board, getting buy-in from staff, getting residents, and really going from there.
What type of work culture do you hope to create and foster with employees, and how would you accomplish that?
That's a great question. So I think, an inclusive environment. I want to be approachable. I am approachable. I've heard sometimes with my management, time management, sometimes that's a curse, but it's also a blessing in a way where a lot of people feel comfortable coming up to me if there's an issue or concern, and I can really hit that on the nail when they do that. How I would foster that was, first of all, I think a lot of that is top down. So again, I would display that. I would display professionalism. I would bring best practices to town hall. I would also again, I would get to know everyone. I think that would be one of the first things I would do. I think there'd be a lot of listening involved too, because I have to earn their respect and trust as well. So that's how I would approach that.
So you know West Boylston a little bit. You live in the area, and you've done your research on the town. What are the key issues?
Key issues, economic development, it is part of my background and a passion of mine, and I see there's so much opportunity in West Boylston. All the businesses, as far as, I have a lot of ideas, but I think, organizing the local businesses for one, getting the website together just for the economic development, advertising the open sites that are available for big businesses, being involved in a chamber, working with our surrounding communities. These things could be low-hanging fruit that I would, get right away, hitting the ground. Another part of that is looking at zoning when it comes to the bigger sites, and even some of the smaller ones, and seeing, if there's certain properties where we keep coming across these problems with developers or people back out, and let's look at why. Maybe we don't change them, but I think it's at least worth looking at these properties and seeing, what's preventing people from coming here. So I think economic development was definitely number one. From my research, watching meetings, I've heard definitely a lot of communication, transparency, and monetization. That is definitely something we have taken very seriously in Dover. So I think for that, getting the communication, Jen, you guys have a great, great Facebook page and everything. And the website does have a lot of information. You have to be a little seasoned to get to a lot of the information, and some of it's outdated. So, I'd put a lot of power behind that as far as getting the website more updated, get a YouTube channel, live streaming on Facebook, social media sites. I think the more people are involved, the more people can passively watch meetings as well. It's been very popular in Dover is people watching it from social media sites because number one, they don't have to come into the meeting. Number two, they're not on Zoom, so they're not really registered in there. So they just like to have it on while they're cooking dinner or driving or something like that. And that's been really huge for us. Stats show that more than 50% of people get their news from social media. A good thing, bad thing, not sure. But, I think, again, our job really is not to judge that. And really, I always look for, let's get the information out to people. And that's how I use social media and the website.
Finance administration is a big part of the position. So, what's been your past role in financial planning, developing the budget, capital improvement, and ensuring financial sustainability?
Sure. So my first experience really with the budget is in Westboro when I was the economic development coordinator. So I was in charge for the EDC's budget. From there, it was under the town manager. But that was my first taste of having a budget and doing all things like that. So also in Dover now as the assistant town administrator, I work directly with the town administrator as far as the budget process. One of the first things we did was we got a grant for a best practice financials study done by the Collins Center. first month I was there, we really went through each one of our financial policies, compared it to best practices, and we had a lot of changes. Another thing we did is we mapped out the budget process. Sounds strange, but nothing was on paper, and this is kind of common in communities. So my town administrator being new as well, we really wanted to understand the process and write it down so we knew, but also so we could tweak some things. The second round, what we really did was, Dover is a very horizontal structure. We have some boards and committees that do not report to the town administrator. That's very common in towns like ours. So these boards and committees would submit their budgets to the finance committee without the town administrator seeing it. This really led to confusion and just a lot of going back and fixing things, right? Just more work for staff, really, in the end. So we proposed a more streamlined process where all the budgets go to the town administrator first, and then he presents them to the warrant committee, finance committee. At first, I would say very strong opinion against something like that. But I think once again, we kind of presented it as, this is going to be easier for you guys in the end. Really, there's not going to go back and fixing things because the town administrator never saw certain committees. We eventually, we got buy-in, and it happened this year, the last budget process. So, a lot of the things I've done over with the budget have just been, I've been side by side with the town administrator. And, in my next role, hopefully in West Boylston, I'm really looking forward to taking lead on that and working with the finance team.
How would you immerse yourself into the budget process here and the finances?
I think it's all about having everyone at the table, department head meetings throughout the year. The budget process is definitely a year-round process. How I would immerse myself, I think right now, a lot of things have changed. Everything's kind of, I don't want to say on the table, but I truly believe that every line item should be looked at. And I also believe that everyone should be in the room. I would definitely have department head meetings. I have more strategic planning meetings with department heads also separate from that, but also with the finance team, getting together, everyone in the room, and going over each line item, going over programs that, maybe one person knows that, oh, not a lot of people really like that program, but, maybe that other person didn't know. If we're all in the room, I think there's a lot we can learn. I also think using data as well is really good as well, and I'm always open to that and looking for data. So I think immersing myself with the town departments, going over line by line, getting feedback from them, that's how I would start that process.
You talked about reviewing your financial policies. So why don't we talk about your financial forecasting? What does that mean to you?
Well, I think that, capital budgeting, I think that's what I think about. Also, we did a 5-year IT lookout plan for Dover. We came in, we were very behind when it came to technology and our infrastructure. So we did a 5-year plan. In capital budgeting, I've had some experience working with the capital budget committee in Dover. A lot of making a lot of their presentations and PowerPoints and things like that, making infographics for residents. It's something we're really trying to focus on education as far as understanding these terms. Free cash, for example. I made an infographic about that, how it's actually not really free. And things like that, making it more accessible. And that's something I'm kind of obsessed with, is making the information more accessible so people understand what's going on. They may not want to come, they may not want to volunteer, but they know what's happening.
So tell us about where you were creative in developing a financial alternative.
Mm-hmm. Well, at the start of my time in Dover, COVID hit. So interesting time to start. I will say there was kind of a freeze, like most municipalities, I'm sure, with spending and hiring and things like that. Unfortunately, we were just on the rollout of a new website, social media channels. Dover needed all of that. So we kind of had, instead of me doing everything, we kind of had to find a solution. So I knew by just making small talk that we had an employee who was part-time and she was really into web development. So I asked her, is this something you'd be interested to do a couple hours a week? She said yes. She took it from there and really kind of grew it into just another part-time position for herself. But she manages the websites, does all the updates, and helps me out with social media things and things like that. And it's been incredibly successful. Again, I think using the staff we have, you have to be creative, you have to get to know them, you have to get to know what they're passionate about and what their interests are. So that is one thing definitely proud of, and it worked out for everyone.
What do you bring to the table with grants?
So I've been involved throughout my career with the community compact grants, whether, helping people fill out the form, the implementation. For example, our best practice study for the Collins, that was a community compact grant. As far as applying to one, I've done it once. In our strategic meetings we have with department heads, we're always talking about grants, and we're always encouraging our DPW, our Parks and Rec, or COA to apply to grants. If we see grants, we send them. Grants. We've taken advantage of so many grants in Dover. Previous administration, I guess, I think there's an assumption that a wealthy town really wouldn't get grants. And that is true when it comes to some things, but when it comes to other things, that is not true. And we were able to get a lot of grants. So definitely, it would be one of the on my list of first things to do when I got here, if I got the job.
Okay. Hypothetical. A local resident stands up at a town meeting and proceeds at length to lecture the citizens of the town on the various town functions that he or she feels are wasteful and extravagant. Through sheer force of personality, this citizen riles up the meeting, and they are bound to determine to slash funding on programs you believe are vital. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think there's a few approaches. So this would be a Board of Selectmen meeting. They stood up, okay. Well, I would definitely look to the board when it comes to the meeting.
This is town meeting.
Oh, town meeting.
Yeah, town meeting, so
Yeah.
different audience.
Okay, I thought it was a selectmen meeting. From there, I think I would, work with the finance team at that moment in town meeting as far as information, because that's the only thing that, the only thing we can show them is actual facts, and hopefully have data there at town meeting for something like this. That has happened in Dover and every town I've worked on where there's had, a very impassioned person at town meeting, kind of in threat of cutting some services or some programs and things like that. I also think that although, we always encourage the process leading up to town meetings where people should really, ask their questions and things like that, and hopefully we can answer them. It's always going to happen, but I think in that scenario, while I was at town meeting, that would be my first step.
So moving on to personnel. In HR today, what are some of the key issues that you think need to be addressed?
Well, HR right now is definitely really difficult with the retention. Hiring is a struggle. One thing I know, I don't know if you guys have gone under, I didn't see a classification study since, but in Dover, the classification study, we're undergoing it with the compensation. But, at this time with gas prices and inflation, it's a hard sell either way to staff and keeping them engaged and happy. And, we obviously, we're not the private sector. So I think that's definitely a struggle for every town right now is keeping our employees and keeping that institutional knowledge, but also having, paying them fairly, making sure we're going according to the pay equity law, but also keeping their interests so they'll stay, incentives, things like that. I think that's definitely a struggle right now I think it's with every sector, honestly, but in municipal, we're under a lot more constraints. So I think that is a big struggle.
When you're hiring employees, give me the 3 most important qualities you seek when you're hiring in general.
The first thing I look for is fit. I think a lot of skills can be learned, and I've seen it firsthand. But the first thing I look for is a fit for a person. And sometimes it's not even a fit like, is they're similar to everyone else. That's really not diversity. Sometimes I'm just thinking, oh, this seems like someone who fits this role really well. It would add diversity to town hall as well. I think, again, that's how we get more ideas, and that's how we progress. So I'm looking always, is this person, can this person fit? Another thing, just, curiosity. I love when staff come up to me and ask me questions. They're like, hey, look at this. I got this. I saw this grant. This town in Ohio is using Alexa AI in technology, and I love that stuff. And so I look for something like that as well, considering the role. But for the most part, I think people like that will always, jump at the chance to do new things, which I like a lot. And I think, it comes down to personality. I think, we want someone professional who's going to represent the qualities and professionalism of the town.
3 things.
These people will be interacting with staff, obviously, and residents. So that is something that I take seriously.
How do you encourage teamwork in the workplace?
Teamwork, I think, again, I think it's a multi-factor. I think one factor, again, is top-down. So, again, people need to see me being a team player. They need to see me communicating, and they need to see me being professional, and I think that's kind of a trickle-down in that sense. Also, getting everyone together. That's how we can work as a team, right? Getting everyone in the room for bi-weekly, monthly meetings, all staff meeting. One good thing with small town is it's pretty easy to have an all-staff meeting. It doesn't have to be such a big production. So in Dover, we're able to do that monthly, in addition to department head meetings. So I think getting everyone at the table and hearing everyone's ideas and listening to people definitely builds up their confidence. They feel like they're being heard, and they feel like we're all working together as a team.
How do you deal with a person who's not a team player?
Unfortunately, that will always happen. We'll always have one person. And, my first approach is always coaching. From there, if there's no improvement, put someone on like a probation basis or something like that. If there's no improvement, then I would follow any of the personnel rules and regulations or personnel laws of the town as far as discipline, warning, written letter from there. And I think, again, that will help ultimately with the culture and teamwork, because if someone's not a team player consistently and is bringing a department down or just not completing their goals, that brings down our teamwork feeling and feeling like a team and the culture in the town. So I think it's important to see that someone was being held accountable. Again, my first approach is always coaching and sitting the person down and what's going on. Is there something you need, something you don't understand? You just don't agree with this. Always good to know the entire picture. But again, if you go through those steps and there's still no change, you have to take action.
Has there been a time in your career that you or somebody who reported to you or worked with you had to face a moral decision in a professional life? Had to make a difficult decision in that, and if yes, how did you deal with it?
I would say, coming to a small town who previously, before my boss was hired, right before me, the town administrator was there for over 20 years. So the town definitely got used to doing things a certain way. And a lot of those things like procurement and things like that were not really up to par to the laws. It was more handshaky. And so I think coming in, me and Chris really had to step down on that and really be like, these are the procurement laws. We're going to follow them. It's going to take a little bit of time. They may not be your friend. We may not be people who we haven't hired before. So it was a hard conversation to have, and it was uncomfortable, but it was good because ultimately, we're following the law. So really, the procurement, pushing that in Dover was a time where I know it would have been easy to do the things the way they've always done, but that's just not how it's going to be anymore. We're gonna follow the procurement laws.
So in small towns, it's not always possible to solve a situation by hiring staff. So, for example, with IT, a lot of these towns can't hire an IT director, but how do you find ways to take care of those areas?
Well, I think, like I mentioned before, seeking out the staff you have now and utilizing their abilities and skills and interests. Also interns. We were able to utilize them for the first time last summer. COVID got a little bit better. From the regional school, we had a couple great high school students pretty much redo our social media for us and put out images and really stock us up for a lot of things. So I think that's definitely a way you can look into. Again, there's always regionalization. You could always look into a town that's nearby and see, what they're doing. Is their person full-time? Are they part-time? I think everything's kind of on the table to look at. And you can really get creative. Again, grants as well. But yeah, I think you have a few options.
Okay. Let's address an area I call a minor detail, communications. So discuss how you would increase communications internally and externally, including use of technology and methods.
Sure. So internally, again, I think I mentioned, but, staff meetings, department head meetings. I would hope to meet with the chair of the board, before every meeting, just to get the agenda ready and to talk about any issues that might come up or concerns. I'm open to meeting with all the board members, once a month. I have an open door policy, and I believe in that. Again, sometimes time management, it's a curse, but, ultimately, when it comes to residents and staff, with residents, this is their town hall. And if I'm available, my door is open for that. And I think that's important. So internally it would be meetings, check-ins with the board. I also think externally, you have, like I said, a good website, great Facebook page. Let's look into other ways where we can broadcast meetings, we can put out information, we can get all updated things on the website, easily accessible, stream meetings, you could have Q&As, live Zoom town hall questions, there's the ability is really endless, and really the whole purpose would be to get all the information out to residents so people can see what we're doing and how hard we're working on these goals.
What does customer service mean to you?
So ever since my retail days in college, I'm telling you, they gave me the best experience for public services. You're always going to get, you might get an irate person, a resident about something, or a staff member. To me, local government, the only road is the high road, and, you sit down with them, you listen to them, and you try to solve their problem. Sometimes the only thing you can do is listen, and that's the only thing you can do. And I do feel like that is important, and I know people do appreciate that. But, I think it also comes to follow-up. If a resident came to see me, had an issue, and I would say, I'll look into this, getting follow-up with them is huge. And, that's where we begin to build trust with residents in government.
So why don't you tell us about some of your interactions or engagement with citizens in your past roles?
So I've been lucky to always been housed in the town administrator or town manager's office in all my positions. So I have had, tons of interactions with citizens, especially in my role community engagement specialist in Foxborough, really that was a major part of my role, was getting all the information out to residents and communicating with them at meetings. We'd hold, finance information style town halls. People would write into me, I would get questions for them, give them to the town manager, and we'd put them out there. I was really wanted to be seen as the point person for residents. And that was a major part of my job in Foxborough. A lot of residents had my cell phone, and that was, again, in Dover as well. People will come in. I like when people know my name. I want people to know me. I want to know them. Again, establishing relationships is really the key to getting anything done.
One of the difficult things in this position is dealing with conflict and disputes and, having to deal with some of the polarized issues that are out there today. And it seems like it's maybe more than, today than it may have been in the past. How do you address these, and how do you ultimately able to get things accomplished?
I think you can't get down to that level, I'm in local government for a reason, and a lot of those issues really, as people know, local government keeps running no matter what. So to me, again, local government's the high road. I just don't get involved when it comes to, other, controversial issues. My job, I think, is to keep this place professional, to keep our staff in a professional setting. It is a really tough time for people in public service everywhere right now. I want them to know that, and I want them to trust me that that's a top priority in this town hall, is just being respectful, civility, and things like that.
So you had heard in our screening round that schools are important here, and the relationship with schools is important. How would you develop and manage that relationship with the schools? Yeah,
and that's definitely something that appealed to me. I know always heard raving things about your schools, and the citizens are definitely very proud of them. As I've witnessed in past experience, getting to know the superintendent, being on a one-on-one meeting with them, not just in budget time, having something where it's scheduled meetings where we're always keeping in check the business manager, and the superintendent was at the preliminary, I think he mentioned a lot about, what's coming up in their plans when it comes to buildings and schools and things like that. And, so I would love to work with the superintendent when it comes to looking at like grants and things like that, new schools. I see our relationship as being very close. Again, something I'd have to work at, obviously, or in trust. But I've always been interested in that aspect of the school. I've always, interns, maybe getting an internship program going. People get kids to know about civics more, get kids into the town hall. I think that we can start there too. I think that would be great. Also, I've always wanted to experiment with having maybe like a student on one of the committees, so if it was, so again, you can have someone who is a student participating in government, again, like I think the opportunities are endless. There's a lot of cities that do this, something similar. Being involved in school is definitely something that excites me.
Okay, so let's move to the relationship with this board. What's the overall relationship you envision working with the select board?
Yeah, I envision a professional, friendly relationship, open communication. It is my job, I feel like, to initiate that and to earn it. Also, like I said in the beginning, and I've seen it all the time in every town, is no surprises. So, I want to keep you guys updated at all times. I never want, something to be a surprise at a meeting. And again, I hope it'd be the same as well. So that's how I see, that's how it would be the ideal relationship.
So how do you communicate with the board on big and small issues?
Well, I think having our, monthly check-ins with members of the board and checking in with the chair, I think that is the best way to be, again, ahead of the game. We're all on the page. Then I get to know you, and you get to know me, and I'll get to know, your certain boards and committees that you're on, your representative, or your interest, or projects that you're interested in looking into, and things like that. I think those face-to-face meetings are huge, and help establish relationships, but also will just always keep our communications going.
So what happens when your opinion differs from the select board opinion? How do you handle that?
All I can do is just respectfully tell you my opinion on something. If it differs, give you some data. I usually like to have a lot of good data when it comes to things like that. If you don't agree with it, you are the board of selectmen, and it's my duty to carry out a policy.
So you're in the middle of a board meeting, and a select board member makes a motion to go into an executive session for a matter that you feel is not qualified under the open meeting law to go into executive session for. What do you do?
Well, if I saw it on, the agenda beforehand, I would definitely try to prevent that situation from even happening in a meeting. But if the member still did it, then I would have to speak up. Just, again, the open meeting law, agree with it or not, we have to follow the law. And I think I would speak up and let you know this isn't an appropriate subject for executive session.
Okay. So what's your personal professional goals look like for the next 5 years?
I want to be a town administrator. That has been my goal since I started this journey from the MMA. I love what I do. And so I think, a professional goal would be getting into that top role and, developing staff, helping them, going for grants, and really developing the community in ways that I think there's so much opportunity. I want to be in a town for a long time. That is my goal.
What does the first 90 days on the job look like?
Well, I think the first 90 days, I think at first would be a lot of internally with staff, a lot of listening, and a lot of meeting people. Listening to them, sitting down, meeting with all staff, and meeting them, getting to know them, but also, their jobs and, their concerns, their wants, and needs, and kind of try to figure out where everyone is. The same with the board, as I mentioned, hopefully we could get together and establish a set of yearly goals that we can have and keep updated. Then again, it'd just be getting to know the community, going to community events, going to the senior center, fire, police, just getting to know everyone so they have a face to a name. They know, hey, my door's open, love to meet you, come in if you have any concerns. So I think that would be, when it comes to communication and meeting people, that would definitely be my top priority. Along with that are a lot of things, a lot of things are coming up soon, a lot of grant deadlines are coming up soon, and we're already into August. So again, to be hitting the road running when it comes to working with the board, the finance team, and getting those things in order as well.
Okay. That concludes my questions on a formal basis. Any other questions from board members? So, seeing none, at this point, Kate, opportunity for you to give a closing statement to the board.
Great. Well, again, I really appreciate your time. It's definitely an honor to be a finalist here. I think I can bring professionalism. I definitely bring experience in economic development, HR, and procurement. I am 2 months shy of completing my procurement certification. So, I think I bring a lot of experience, especially in small towns. And that is where I think I do best. And I love the all hands on deck. I love working together and, collaboration. I think that is huge. Ultimately, I think comes down to relationships and building relationships. And that's something I'm passionate about. And I've also seen it work. So again, very honored to be a finalist, and thank you for your time.
So Kate, congratulations on being a finalist once again, and thank you for your time. And the board will be having a deliberation, a discussion after this point, and you'll be hearing from me as to how that moves on. So
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, those are your two candidates that have been presented to the board. Again, want to thank the work of the screening committee, as mentioned by the chair earlier. We had 20 applications that come in, six interviewed in a screening round. We had 3 finalists. One had pulled out just before the announcement of candidates for this. And so these are the 2 candidates that are before the board at this point. You have our information that we presented to you. We did background checks and reference checks on these 2 candidates. You have that information. As you see, we stay positive in the discussion because these candidates, this is a public session sector, and so we always try to keep our comments on a positive side. We ask the select board when you get into your discussion to try to keep your comments on the positive side of candidates, and because they go back, and so on. So appreciate your understanding of that moving forward. So the candidates are before you. I'm here to assist with any questions that you may have, but the discussion is now in your hands, as to, moving forward with these 2 candidates.
I will open up for discussion.
I don't have much to add to what's going on. I'd make a motion to start negotiations or talk to the town administrator about negotiations with Jennifer Warren Demet. That would be my motion.
Is there a second?
1 second.
Any further discussion?
I will say that I thought both candidates were very well qualified. I will agree that Jen had more polished answers in the interview. That's the lawyer in her. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I think both of them would do a good job. I think Kate used the word fit. I think ultimately she may be a better fit for the position based on her background, but I have no issue supporting Jen.
I would concur. I liked, she was very polished. She did a great job answering the difference between leadership and management, and that is not something most people answer right off the bat. I liked her approach to finance and the budget. I also thought she did a really good job when it came to some of the questions around what happens if someone stands up during a town meeting and is...
She was better.
She definitely said, well, there's a point in time where you shut down the conversation. It doesn't proceed, and only doing this for a little bit of time, there is that need to sometimes shut it down. And I thought her answer there really struck home. I do like that she's 8 miles away. And I think that she also has a lot of history of grant writing, and we use that a lot. So I think that was really one of my key takeaways as well. So I think she'd be a really good fit and would agree to. We should enter into that.
I agree. I think she had a lot of polish. And I think she would bring a new level to that position that would be terrific,
I also like one more thing. She also, for her first 90 days, the first meeting she wants to have is with the current interim town administrator to understand exactly what's happening. And I'm like, that is the most amazing. That's the right answer because he's not going to be here. So that's the first meeting you want to have. So she kind of already had it planned, and she already had it planned, like your budget season's happening here, your next
town meeting is here where we need to go through. She was already planning what she needed to do to get that work done. So it was like she was already at home drawing up our budget.
I think that reflected in actually the first thing you brought up, which was the question about what to do during town meeting.
Yeah.
She knew about the person, John?
The moderator.
I jump right in with the moderator. I jump in with this. I mean, she knew exactly what was going to happen. She had a good, idea.
And she knew our timeline of when we needed to.
She certainly is already
She's like,
scheduled.
it's already, yeah, she's got the schedule in hand. So I liked all that.
For me, I do like Jennifer. So I do like the way she was talking about the finance. Seems to be, she does understand the finance. So she could be good with the finance. So as she does a lot of grants, looks like, she has hands-on experience with many grants. And also when it comes to the, which are burned out or, what are we going to do? So if you need some more, if you need to close down a department or alternate, or finding an alternate solution, our answer was better. So I liked it, and that's the way we go. But the thing is, in economic development, I'm not sure, how much we can do for the economic development, but I do like Jennifer's answer on that. So in overall, I do agree with the rest of the members. I do like, the first candidate, Jennifer Warren Diamond. Having said,
Do we need to do a vote now?
Yeah, so we have a motion and a second.
So is the, if I may,
yeah, I'm trying to get there. We have a motion and second.
I have a question. So on the motion, is it to appoint?
No,
No.
to go into negotiations.
Okay.
Yep.
What do you, your face says,
Well, typically the motion, and I'm not sure the difference, but typically the motion is to appoint pending, subject to successful negotiation with the candidate. So that is, that's a positive action of appointing a candidate subject to a successful negotiation. So if you don't get there, then it's not an appointment. But you're letting the candidate know up front that you're offering that position, to the candidate, so.
that makes sense.
That's, I don't care how we,
Do you want-
that's not the way we usually do it, but that's fine. That's fine. I mean, we usually go into negotiations, then the town administrator and usually the chair or the vice chair would go into, but either way is fine with me.
So it sends a better message.
Raj, what do you,
I think we already have a motion and a second. If we just want to change it to
amend the motion or?
amend it to,
That's my suggestion, that you handle it whichever way you have, but typically it's a positive.
Without the town admin, or does our current town admin do it?
Current one.
with either the chair, the chair or somebody, and then it would come back to the board. We would have executive session.
Is it him or the town
No, the
admin?
town administrator would come into executive session with us.
So,
Oh, but we'd talk to her about
Yes.
the contract and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Raj, so the amended motion would be to amend the motion we have to appoint Jennifer as the town administrator, subject to a successful negotiation
Correct.
of contract.
I'll second the amendment, or do we have to vote on the first thing first?
Usually we
No, you
withdraw.
can't.
We
Yeah,
withdraw the
you can't
motion.
amend my motion.
Yeah, so you guys should both withdraw your motions and redo the motions. Withdraw your second, withdraw your first.
I'm done.
with the second, and then we need to make this.
Okay, I'm
I
done.
just heard you guys, you withdraw the motion, you withdraw the
Withdraw.
second.
Okay.
Then you want to make whatever we wrote?
You made the original motion, you want to make the
Yeah.
next one?
Yeah, that's fine. The motion is to appoint Jennifer Warren Dement as town administrator after a successful contract
Any
negotiations.
successful contract negotiation, yes.
Yep.
I second.
Motion and second. So we'll take a vote on it. So, roll call vote.
We don't need a roll.
He's
Over
on.
here.
He's
Need a
on.
roll call with him.
Mark is yes?
Okay, so are you going to,
Are you going to call us?
He did it, so he called Mark, I think.
Marcus, yes?
Chris,
yes?
Pat,
Yes.
Christina,
Yes.
my vote is yes. The motion passed. We'll start the negotiation. To start the negotiation, I would like to be the one of the person to be negotiating, and also the vice chair is interested.
So I have a question before we do this. Are we going to revise the contract prior to negotiation? Because, so that the current contract isn't sent, because there were revisions to that contract we wanted to make.
Well, I mean, the current contract is a matter of public record.
Right. But we were looking to, as we did in the past with others, to revise the contract prior to having it sent to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, the current contract must be older.
It is. There's just some updates to it. So that is my question. Because I'm hearing Raj say he wants to do it and he wants Chris to do it with him. I'm just asking, are one of you making those updates to that contract prior?
I think it's going to be, maybe, could we change tomorrow's meeting? Could we add an executive session? We have a meeting tomorrow. I don't know if we,
I don't believe so for this, no.
but, so it would have to be. So I guess the board could send any comments to the town administrator. Any board member can send any comments to the town administrator in regards to the
something we want
contract.
changed in the contract.
Directly to him. He can put some information together, and then maybe, if he feels, we'll have an executive session to discuss it before we move forward. We can
Why
talk,
couldn't you
we
add it
can
to
talk.
tomorrow's meeting? I mean, it's in
it's
24
timing.
hours.
I think the agenda can be changed, but I'm not certain about an executive session.
Yeah.
I'm not
It's
sure.
not enough time.
It has to be, stuff that was not, perceived to be,
Right.
so I think you'd have an issue. You don't want to screw this one up, with.
Oh, we want you to stay here longer with us. Yeah, we do.
So
I had to change my contract for
The following meeting, we'll have an
I think our
executive.
next,
We need a motion for this.
no,
What are we
no,
talking about?
no, I think we just, let's see, our next meeting would be, we're talking today's the 19th, our next, tomorrow's the 20th, and then the next meeting's the 3rd.
Well,
it's
so you
only-
guys are going to enter into negotiations. Any of us can send those, we'll send that feedback to
Jim.
Jim. I do think do have feedback. So Raj, if you're going to be negotiating this with Jim, I'll send both of you that feedback. I will not include Chris because that will be 3 members of the select board on the email.
Yeah, that's fine. I would send, personally, I would send everything directly to Jim, because Jim will put the contract together. Personally, but you can do whatever way you want. But the 3rd, I would say that we talked to Mr. Purcell in regards to the 3rd, putting on an executive session to discuss it. I don't think he'll be ready to, but he can reach out to, you can talk to Jim tomorrow. He'll be here. Yep. Make him,
Should we tell her that we're going to do this? Like, just tell her,
well, John will
Motion to
talk,
adjourn?
John will talk to Jim tomorrow, and they can figure out what the next
I'm
steps
just thinking
are.
about giving her just the news.
But typically,
He will
if you wish to call her, I can, but you can, but typically I call it, everybody involved.
Yep.
And let them know the status, and that,
That's fine with me.
when whoever's selected, I let them know how they'll be contacted, basically. But, when I leave any place, I always make immediate phone calls, because I know I would want to be, told, so.
As a recommendation, we probably, and Raj, I'm guessing you don't want board members contacting her before negotiations, so I think logically it should go through him, and then we shouldn't contact her. It should be that board that's doing the
Right,
negotiation.
typically that's the
None of
case,
us.
yeah.
See you, Chris. No, he's saying goodbye.
Just wondering.
He's saying goodbye to you. I make a motion to adjourn?
I second.
Meeting adjourned.
We're gonna vote
All
on,
in
we're
favor?
gonna vote on it?
Vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, folks, thank you very much.